Thank you so much for this very kind introduction. And so also very warm welcome from my side to this online 3D curatorial tour and discussion. My name is Marie Meyerding, and my show Defiant Vision is currently on view at Apex Art in Tribeca in New York City, as well as online. In New York City, you will see it until the end of July, and you can also, as we will do now, have a look at it online on the Apex Art website. At this point, I want to thank the team at Apex Art again for their wonderful organization and support, without which this exhibition would not have come into existence. So the idea for this exhibition, for Defiant Visions, arose from my dissertation research about the representation of women in photography in apartheid South Africa, which I have submitted last month and which will be published as a book in the next years. And the title of this show is inspired by Darren Newberry's very important book, Defiant Images, Photography in Apartheid South Africa from 2009, which traces how photographers have documented the violence that dominated the country through anti-apartheid imagery, which is now often referred to as struggle photography. And his book is mostly focusing on well-known male photographers. My dissertation research and the work that's on view in this exhibition foregrounds largely ignored women practitioners and illuminates the intersections of women's experiences in photography and everyday life during apartheid. So I think now we could have a first hop into the space. Ryan, if you, thank you. My exhibition Defiant Visions showcases women photographers' resistance to the apartheid regime through the lenses of their cameras. What you can see here when you enter the exhibition space is a timeline, and it gives you a very broad overview of what apartheid was for all of those who don't have a clear knowledge about the time span that this entails. And it also gives some further details about some of the abbreviations that visitors might encounter in some of the photographs that they see in the show. And very shortly, apartheid was the system of institutionalized discrimination against people of color that existed in South Africa between 1948 and 1994. And during these decades of oppression, women took photographs to expose not only racist, but also gender discriminatory social, economic, and political structures. In this exhibition, Defiant Visions, you'll encounter both moments of happiness and abundance, as well as scenes of sadness and desolation. There are eruptions of violence and instances of inner peace, communal activities alongside individual struggles, and these photographs and images all reveal everyday life within states of emergencies. So Defiant Visions really tries to show the extremes of apartheid South Africa as it was captured by the women photographers whose work is on the show. They showed spectacular as well as vernacular histories and captured these through their lenses. All in all, there you'll find the work of 7 women practitioners who worked over the course of nearly half a century. The exhibition includes works by Mabel Fleetu, Jansi Wissima, Zubeida Valley, Leslie Lawson, Mavis Ntindeki, Deborah May, and Georgina Cavellis. And they are all brought together to not only illuminate the long unnoticed image production of these women during apartheid, but also to show how they used their cameras as a means of resistance against a regime of injustice. So the exhibition explores the work of practitioners who mainly employed black and white imagery and focused on the women surrounding them. And thereby, they also exposed issues of intersectionality, that is, moments of discrimination, which are based on the overlapping of several social classifications, such as race, class, or gender, which these women encountered in their daily lives, as well as in their photographic careers. Now, when you first enter the space, you'll encounter the work of Mabel Fleetu. Those are magazine pages that show Mabel Fleetu's photography training, as well as some of her images. Mabel Fleetu is considered South Africa's first Black woman photojournalist, and she had worked as a nurse for more than 25 years before she was trained at the monthly publication Zonk African People's Pictorial, which was the first mass circulated magazine aimed at a Black readership in South Africa. And probably because most images were published without credits at the time, her photographs have only recently been just rediscovered. So this exhibition is likely the first presentation of her work to a wider audience. So on at first you'll see Situ's own appearance in an article about her photography training, which illustrates the beginning of her career as a photographer. Here you can see on those pages that we see right now, an issue from October 1956. And on the left, you'll see a cover in which in bold letters, it is stated that now Mary Clito is trained as the first South African woman photographer. And then on 3 subsequent pages, you get a very detailed account of her photography training, as well as on her life. So you can see her working in the darkroom, working on assignments, but also working as a nurse. And you can, if you're in the space or also if you're online, I really invite you to read the texts to get a good impression about how she was introduced as a photographer. And then on the other side, on the other wall, you see 2 pages which were dedicated to Mary Clito's photographs completely, which were published in later issues in 1957. And so these display photographs taken by her, which in addition to events, mainly show portraits of members of the Black communities around Berga, which is formerly Port Elizabeth, where she lived. And these portraits also include ambiguous portrayals of modern womanhood between reality and fantasy, as well as Black celebrity and consumer culture. And especially on the left, I think her photographs together with the advertisement, including Hazel Futer, is very poignant a portrayal of the time of how women were represented, and also how Mary Clito chose to represent the members of her community. Now going over or turning around in the exhibition space, you'll encounter the work of Janci Wissima. While there's already very little known about the male photographers who worked in the period between the high time of magazine photography of the late 1950s and then the highly politicized photography from the late 1970s, the situation is even worse for women. So there's very little known about women photographers working in this in-between period, and one of the exceptions is Janci Wissima. She was born in the Netherlands and immigrated to South Africa when she was a child, and was later trained in photography by Anne Fisher, a well-known studio photographer in Cape Town, who mainly became known for her wedding photographs, but also worked on more broad topics. And she got her training in 1947 and subsequently started to freelance, focusing primarily on portraits of people and especially on children from the Cape Town area where she lived. Besides that, her work was also presented as the first solo exhibition of photographs in the South African National Gallery in 1975. However, what she's best known for is the commission by the Cape Institute of Architects, which she received in the late 1960s. And for several years during the early 1970s, she documented the inhabitants and the architecture of the residential inner city area, District 6 in Cape Town. District 6 was as I said, white inner city area in Cape Town, which was declared a whites-only area by the apartheid regime. This led to the destruction and associated forced removal by the government. And so Wissima photographed District 6 before and after its destruction. Alone in District 6, more than 60,000 people lost their homes as part of the anti-apartheid government's policy of spatial segregation. This reserved the inner cities primarily to the white minority population. So here what we can see is really, you can see scenes of moving, scenes of destruction, and also depictions from the everyday life of the women and girls living in District 6. You see moments of pause and happiness, as well as of relocation. And what these images show really well is how the personal and the political were linked for these women and girls in their everyday lives in apartheid South Africa. And you also see how close Janci Wissima got with the sitters, so how people would invite her into their homes to take photographs. Now turning around, you see the only film that is included in this exhibition, which is a half-an-hour-long documentary from 1981. It's called You Have Struck a Rock. And now before I talk a bit more about the film, I would like to have a quick, so that we can see a few sequences of the
There's
film.
no other two ways for the South African government to control the people during the time. A lot of people were banned, a lot of women were banned, a lot of women were in jail, a lot of them.
The pass or reference book is the means by which the white minority government controls our labor and our lives, seen as units of labor, as appendages of the white economy, while we women are seen as appendages of men. Although black women serve on every farm and in every home, providing a huge indispensable
people must stay here in Cape Town.
Okay, thank you, Ryan.
Oh, we had to look.
So now you got a quick glimpse into the video. You can also have a look online, have a closer look at the film. So the film was edited by US-American Deborah May and the South African photographer Georgina Cavellis. Cavellis was also trained by Anne Fisher, but a bit later in the early 1960s, and later became a commercial practitioner and filmmaker. The film recalls the events of the famous 1956 Women's March to the Union buildings in Pretoria, where approximately 20,000 women protested the introduction of pass laws for Black women. These pass laws were similar to a passport system introduced as a law that was a means of influx control by the apartheid regime, and thereby they severely limited the mobility of Black people in the country. We've seen a quick glimpse, and we've seen how this film really is a collage of interviews, archival films and photographs, filmed scenes and background songs. And thereby the documentary vividly recalls the protests as well as the aftermath of these events. And I included this film in this exhibition because I wanted to give visitors a bit more of the historical contexts of the political events against which the photographs in this exhibition space were taken. And now, if we turn around to the other side, you'll find the work of Zubeida Valley. She is one of 9 women photographers who form part of the photographic collective and picture agency AfroPix. This collective played a crucial role in providing anti-apartheid imagery to national as well as international presses and organizations during the 1980s. And the collective was often described as masculinist because of its male-dominated hierarchy, yet there were 9 women photographers who formed part of it. Those are Jill de Vlies, Ellen Elmendorp, Dizini Mudlia, later Subin, Biddy Podridge, Wendy Schwegman, Giselle Wolfson, Anna Zeminski, and then Zubeida Valley and Leslie Lawson. And the works of the latter 2 are included in this exhibition. Their work is displayed not only as standalone prints, but also in, at the time, published in internationally well-known photo books, which I will return to later, such as The Courtauld or Beyond the Barricades, to show not only how powerful these images are in themselves, but also how important the contextualization of these photographs through texts was for the political struggle. Zubeida Valley was born in Newlands in Cape Town 1963, and in 1974 she and her family were forcibly removed to Belgravia and Athlone under the Group Areas Act. Again, a law that restricted most developed areas around Cape Town to whites only. 10 years later, Valley started a photography course at the Peninsula Technikon. The photographs that we can see here were mostly taken during the 1980s, which were some of the most violent years of apartheid. And these images bear witness to women's grief and resistance to the regime's brutal oppression. They can be seen as examples for this sort of anti-apartheid imagery, now commonly referred to as struggle photography. And you can see depictions of political activists in action, as well as the brutal oppression by the apartheid government and the tragic consequences, which often involve death, injuries, and destructions. We see, for instance, an African National Congress Women's League meeting on Women's Day in Langa in Cape Town, or a Black Sash member protesting the detainment of anti-apartheid activists in Cape Town. Next to Valley's work in this exhibition, we also have Leslie Lawson's work in the, in the corner here. So Leslie Lawson was a founding member of the collective AfroPix, and she was highly engaged with photography in the 1980s. She was born in 1952 in Durban as part of a white middle-class family. And in 1978, she received her first photography training working for the audiovisual department of the non-governmental organization SACET, which stands for South African Committee on Higher Education. Afterwards, she started to focus on photography and joined a workshop at the Open School, which was led by the famous South African photographer, David Goldblatt. She was really motivated by telling stories about ordinary people's lives and accompanied friends and acquaintances to capture life under apartheid. The photographs that she took in a knitwear factory for a friend doing a PhD on the subject, or images that she captured while accompanying her friend, the land rights activist Annika Claessens, would later form the basis for an assignment she received in 1983 when SACET, so the South African Committee on Higher Education, paid her to produce a book of interviews and photographs aimed at the growing women's movement in the trade unions. And some of the results, which were later published in the book, you can see here in those prints. As you will tell from the images, we see political activism, but Lawson in these photographs really focused more on everyday situations of structural violence in the lives of Black women and also Black working women, who she captured not only at work, as in, for instance, night cleaner polishing the boardroom table taken in Johannesburg in 1984 that we see in the middle here, or on the right corner, we have a photograph called Frisking at the end of the working day in a Johannesburg knitwear factory from 1981, but also during their leisure time, as like on the far left, in the photograph, Mavis dressed for church in her backyard room, V Valley, Johannesburg in 1987. Next to the prints that we have on the wall, there is also a vitrine which displays the work Night Shift from 1982. It consists of photographs and texts that present excerpts from an audiovisual program. This program features Maureen Sithole, a nurse aide in a Johannesburg old age home, and recalls her everyday struggle as a Black working woman in apartheid South Africa. Further examples, you can see that some of the prints in the vitrine and in the prints on the wall are the same, and you will find some of them again in the photo book Working Woman that I will return to later, where you can really get a very good impression about the close collaboration Lawson had with her subjects. Now, going a step back towards the slideshow, we encounter the work of the last photographer in this exhibition, Mavis Mthandeki. She was one of the earliest Black women photographers who documented Black life in South Africa. And prior to becoming a photographer, she had worked as a domestic worker in the white suburbs of Cape Town for many years. Then in 1989, she quit her job and attended a one-year media course at the politically motivated Community Arts Project. She was mandated onto this course as a representative of the political organization United Women's Congress, which later became part of the African National Congress Women's League, the ANC, which is still the ruling party today. She went onto this course together with Primrose Talakumeni, who was also mandated onto this course as a member of the United Women's Congress. And while Primrose Talakumeni was in her 50s, Mavis Mthandeki was in her 40s when they both started to learn how to photograph in this course. As part of the course, they not only learned how to photograph, but they also learned to silk screen, to do posters and t-shirts, and organize themselves, like produce media for the political organizations that they represented in this course. As part of the course, as I said, she also learned to photograph, and together with Primrose Talakumeni, she decided to focus on photography and to do an exhibition on the women surrounding them. The exhibition was called The Way We Live, and for this exhibition for 3 months, they took photographs mainly around Cape Town of the women. And this exhibition later traveled not only within South Africa to political meetings, but also to art exhibitions. So during the mid-1990s, her photographs were shown in some of the most renowned art institutions, such as the Photographers Gallery in London, or also the South African National Gallery in Cape Town. And the images that you see here in the slideshow were mainly taken in 1989, 1990 for the exhibition, The Way We Live. Now we turn around, and before we look at some more of the photographic prints taken by Mavis Mthandeki, I want to show you a video of Mavis Mthandeki. We met in Cape Town earlier this year, and recorded a message that she wanted to give about this exhibition, about her photographs. It's a 3-minute video that we will have a look at now.
Yeah, I'm Mavis Mthandeki. I like to do some exhibition because it's very important. That exhibition, it speaks itself. How is good it is. It's not easy. You're taking some photographing, but actually you have to have a patience to do it. And some of people, they reject. But when you're expressing yourself, to talk to them, they will agree to you can take some picture. So that's why I like to doing this exhibition. Because of it's really encouraging me. It's always improving what I've done. It's always the people, they were encouraging me. They said I've got something, I can do it. Also, yeah, some of, like Mary, she always to say, yeah, it's good in that. Some of other people, especially the church also, they're motivating me to say, yeah, it's good to doing that maybe. They see what I've done it. And yeah, that's why I'm motivated about this exhibition. And we walk a long walk, me and Primrose, to take some pictures. It's not only just we do it in Tambo, we do it all over. We walk in Khayelitsha, we walk in Nyanga. So it's expressing the people of their community, the suffering. It's for everything. Yeah, that's why we like to, to expressing ourselves, to say why we're taking this picture. Yeah, I think it's lovely, what we might do. But actually we really have to be working with the people. We have to work with the people. Yeah, that's it.
So, yeah, so now we've seen some of the slides that Mavis Mthandeki took, and next to those in the space, you'll also find 10 exhibition prints taken by Mavis Mthandeki that show how she focused her lens on the women surrounding her. Because other than international journalists who parachuted into the townships in the early 1990s to document the country's transition and the violence that burst out, she was a member of the communities she photographed. And she captured the women surrounding her as mothers, workers, and activists in the political as well as in the domestic spheres. Here you can see, for instance, a march of domestic workers to demand a wage increase in the center of Cape Town, or also Jean Benjamin at the United Women's Congress General Council meeting at a church in Belleville. And so there are political protests that she photographed, but she also did images of the architectures and interiors of the townships and informal settlements around Cape Town that provide a very important visual archive of Black life during the country's transition to democracy, which was marked by violence. So here we also see women at a lunch in Kwawezi, from the ANC Women's League in this corner. Or a bit further to the right, we have an incredible portrait of Margot Goofy and her son in their small shack in Tambo Square, taken in the early 1990s. And here you can also see how Mavis Mthandiki, though she only learned how to photograph, dealt with very delicate lighting conditions in these shacks and small houses around Cape Town. So next to the photographic prints that we've seen, the magazines, the film, the slides, the exhibition also showcases 4 photo books in the middle of the exhibition space to really sit down and look at the work of women photographers and life under apartheid a bit more in depth. So here we have, next to Leslie Lawson's Working Women from 1985, that you can see on the left, also 2 of the most prominent photo books from the 1980s, that showed the horrors of apartheid to the world, which are South Africa, the Courtauld Heart from 1986, and Beyond the Barricades, Popular Resistance in South Africa in the 1980s from 1989. And then on the right, there's also the recently published photo book, Sites of Struggle, The History of the Tambo Village Women, which showcases Mavis Mthandiki's photographs in further breadth and also offers glimpses into the political transformation of South Africa and its women's organizations, while telling the history of a radical women-led settlement project. So all in all, Defiant Vision tries, through a compilation of prints, slides, film, magazines, and photo books, to prove that women were actively involved in photography throughout the apartheid era. These images are a testament not only to how the styles in photography, but also the portrayal of South African women changed over the course of 5 decades. These images were produced for various media, and they also show the changing field of photography in South Africa at large. So we've seen magazine photographies from the 1950s, then art photographs, urgent newspaper reports, and political photo books, as well as finally the opening of the art field to Black women practitioners towards the end of apartheid. The exhibition also tries to illustrate how these photographers have succeeded in exposing the structural, often invisible violence of the regime by sequencing and contextualizing their images. So by bringing to light this hitherto neglected collection of images from apartheid South Africa, Defiant Visions invites visitors to critically question their own, as well as collective historical and contemporary image memories from areas and times of crises. Next to the exhibition, which is on view in Tribeca and online, there are also 2 more public programs that will also take place online on Zoom. So towards the end of this month, on the 27th of June, also at noon New York City time, we have an online conversation between the photographer Mavis Mthandiki, Pastor Angela Kem, and me about the recently published photo book Sites of Struggle, The History of the Tambo Village Women, and the history behind the photo book. So this book tries to show how Mthandiki captured not only the political transformation of the country and the transition of the women's organizations, but also the difficult and dangerous relocation of numerous women from KTC to Tambo Village, which are 2 different areas in Cape Town. As the premier settlement financed by the new government after the first free elections in 1994, Tambo Village stands as a testimony of the women's defiance and their political claim on land and houses. And this book tells the history of these courageous women, captured through the lens of Mavis Mthandiki. And then towards the closure of the show in the end of July, on Thursday, the 27th of July, also at noon New York City time, there is an online film screening of the documentary South Africa Chromatic Portraits, which is followed by a panel discussion with photographer Leslie Lawson and the directors Nathalie Masduron and Valérie Aurea. And this documentary, South Africa Chromatic Portraits from 2014, depicts 40 years of political events in South Africa through the lens of its photographers. These range from David Goldblatt, the founding father of South African documentary photography, and the historical members of Afropix, that was inspired by Magnum and created in 1982, to the contemporary photography scene and the heirs of this so-called struggle photography, including Jody Bieber, Peter Hugo, Zanele Muhuli, and Thabiso Sikala. So for now, I want to thank you all very much for tuning in, and I'm very excited to hear your thoughts and your questions about the exhibition.